Canadians are worried more about the cost of living than any other single problem. And economists say the biggest inflationary pressures come from our biggest manufacturers. Well, W5 reporter Stephen Dewar has been looking into that situation since we left you for the summer last June 1st.
Let's start by putting you in the driver's seat, as they say, and seeing whether you can reach the economic brakes, even with the help of your government, after the round of auto price increases of last week.
The price announcements go into pages and pages and pages, which we are examining to determine the relationship between American and Canadian prices.
But you did say that if prices went up again in Canada this year, you'd do something about it. Are you going to do something about it?
I said in response to a speculative story that increases would be in the nature of $200, that those would be substantial increases that certainly would require some action by the government.
Do you not regard $117 as substantial, sir?
My previous comment was related to $200. I said we're analyzing the extent of the increases and their relationship to American prices.
You're trying to avoid answering the question, Mr. Basford, on car prices and Canadian consumers.
I'm analyzing the statements to determine that any action taken by the government is soundly based.
What action could the government take?
Well, that's what we're examining.
When Mr. Basford worries about prices, he's worried about inflation. In August, he said he'd investigate the auto industry if they raised prices unreasonably. Since then, prices have gone up about $100. Now Mr. Basford is examining that situation, as most voters and all drivers will want to do. Let's begin by comparing our car prices with those in the U.S. We pay $500 or $600 more car for car than American drivers. That's about 17%. Here's how Ford of Canada President Carl Scott explained the higher Canadian prices to CTV newsman Wally Mott.
Well, a good illustration, for instance, is the price of the Maverick that sells for $1,995 in the United States and $2,375 in Canada. Now, 8.5% of this differential is represented by the difference in the value of a dollar. Another 5% represents the difference in tax. The balance, which amounts to roughly $100, is the differential in costs of producing and distributing and managing an automotive company in Canada versus the managing of a much larger one in the United States. There are also differentials in policy and warranty because of our colder winters, because of the status of some of our roads in certain areas of the Dominion.
And we're no better off. We're still at 17%.
Roughly 17%.
The gap hasn't narrowed since the Canada-U.S. Auto Pact because taxes are up. After you allow for everything, the Canada-U.S. price gap averages about 5% in real terms. Mr. Scott says the differential is because of operating costs, but there are some indications that Canadian operations may be more profitable than in the U.S. Ford has had record profits, and in Canada, labor paid for in Canadian dollars cuts labor costs 8.5%. And most of those new Ford Mavericks breaking North American sales records were built in St. Thomas, in Canada. No one outside the industry can say how much profit Canadian auto manufacturers earn. Only Ford of Canada files an annual report. But it consolidates all Ford's British Commonwealth interests together with Canadian steel mills and electronics operations. So it's no help either. The only hard facts available are in Washington. In that city, W5 talked with Senator Gaylord Nelson, who is chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Monopoly, and we interviewed Ralph Nader, the safety critic who has become an advocate for all consumers.
This year we had a substantial price increase ranging around $120 or $130 in real terms, and there's no safety innovations for 1970 cars. What other excuse can there be? The productivity continues to increase, and if some of the raw materials costs increase, they can easily be absorbed within that structure. There haven't been many unanticipated labor increases in this year. As far as product quality is concerned, Consumer Reports is reporting a deteriorating state of affairs. Last year's cars that they tested had double the average defects that the prior year's cars had. There's a breakdown in quality control.
They just raised prices, claiming that they need the price increase. I doubt it, but they're the leading industry in this country, and when they raise prices, everybody else follows suit. And that's been going on for the last several years with great inflation at the same time. in a war situation in this country, and all the great corporations asking the men to make sacrifices, but they haven't been making any of their own. I think we ought to have the facts as to what their costs of production are. We don't have them. Mr. Nader did introduce a document, a printout from a month's production at the Ford Motor Company, which, after studying, Mr. Nader concluded indicated that the labor costs, total labor costs of producing Ford is about $300.
That'd be less than a third of what General Motors normally maintains it is.
Yes, and on a previous occasion, Senator Kefauver 10 years ago concluded it was about $375. No doubt in my mind that it's a whole lot lower than they claim it is, but how can we effectively deal with the issue when nobody can find out how much it does cost to produce a car?
Well, I think it's quite well established that the price of a $3,000 car includes no more than $300 of productive labor costs. The Wall Street Journal over a decade ago gave a figure about $170 for productive labor costs. The combined cost of a pair of shoulder harnesses, which were selling from, say, $23 to $40 actually, was less than $3 a pair. The spread was due to the markup and the tremendous profit margins that the auto industry enjoys. I don't think many people realize that again and again the auto industry registers year after year as the #2 industry in profits after the drug industry. General Motors' profit rate of return is unparalleled. It ranges from 21 to 28% on investment after taxes. And that is a remarkable figure.
How does the automotive industry go about setting up prices? How does it set them?
It's what's called a target rate of return, which is a formula that GM has used since the 1920s. Basically, they establish a target sales level, and they decide what they want to earn. And then they work backwards and set their prices on that basis, including, as a cost of doing business, their tax break. This is why, even though GM pays about a 50% level tax rate on their profits, they're making as much profit, if not more, after taxes than they did in 1929 to 30. They always go in lockstep pricing, even though GM, which is the price leader, doesn't begin the process in recent years.
Except this year they did.
Except this year they did. Chrysler has begun it in recent years. They all end up the same. That is, they all raise prices to meet the competition.
Does anyone in the outside of the automobile industry have detailed information of the relationship between costs and prices?
I think the Antitrust Division of the Justice Department has the most detailed information, and it's locking it up.
Why are they locking it up?
Because they've decided not to proceed and prosecute the auto industry or to break up General Motors. And if you ask why that, I can just give you the power of that industry, which of course is pervasive throughout the United States, has very good contacts in Congress, has very good contacts with political campaign funding, and generally calls the tune in Washington.
I don't think in the general sense of the word that there's real competition in the marketplace. I think it is a monopoly, and it's divided up between or among 3 companies. Now, in any monopoly situation, ordinarily, public utility or something like that, it's government regulated. You get knowledge of what their costs of production are and limit their profits. Here's a situation where they can charge any price they please, and there's no way for our government, apparently, or a lack of willingness on the part of the government, to force the issue to find out whether their price increases are justifiable.
So far, we've been talking about the base price of your car, but that Ford computer printout Mr. Nader got a hold of showed that about 10 options can double the profit ratio on a car. The Maverick offers 15 options. Other cars offer up to 40. There's a high profit, too, when you look at the area of replacement parts.
As long as they feel that they can continue selling the same car year after year, dressed up a little bit stylistically, and make tremendous profits, there's no incentive for them to change. In fact, there is often an incentive for them to go backwards. The bumper, for example, on cars today doesn't even protect itself, much less the car, as it did years ago. And what is this costing the motorist? The trivial chrome-type bumper on American cars and Canadian cars today is costing the American motorist $1 billion a year in unnecessary auto repair costs. And this is a figure given to us by the Michigan AAA Motor Club. These bumpers are designed to withstand a collision not exceeding 2 miles per hour by the manufacturer's own standards disseminated by the Society of Automotive Engineers. Now, the point is, bumpers should at least withstand collisions up to 10 miles per hour. And it's that spread that's responsible for over $1 billion of unnecessary auto costs. Now, what does this represent? Millions and millions of dollars of extra sales to the auto industry from replacing parts, the grille sectors and the fender sectors that have been damaged because these chrome eyebrows simply don't do the job. And you see it throughout the automobile. When a bearing goes on a fuel pump, instead of replacing the bearing for $1 or so, you have to replace the entire fuel pump with labor, which could be $35 to $40. This is the kind of inbuilt, designed-in auto repair costs that are jacking up the price tremendously of maintenance to the motorist. The only innovation in the auto industry is innovation in terms of automation. That is, greater productivity at the plant through modern machinery to produce obsolete cars.
The most dramatic recent example of automobile companies conspiring to withhold improvements from your car came to light in California. A 5-year investigation there led to charges that the companies got together to prevent introduction of devices to reduce the enormous pollution caused by cars.
In 1964, late 64, the Justice Department's Antitrust Division began an investigation into the auto industry's collusion over a period of a decade or more to restrain the development and marketing of auto pollution control systems or devices. They dated the conspiracy to begin at least as early as 1953. In 1966, they had enough information, I'm speaking of the Justice Department, to call a grand jury in Los Angeles. For years, the auto industry was telling the Los Angeles pollution authorities that they couldn't put adequate exhaust controls on their cars. And in the spring of, I believe, 65, they just finished saying they couldn't do it for 66. And then California certified 4 alternative pollution control systems built by smaller companies outside the auto industry. And all of a sudden, presto, the auto industry announced that it could do it for 1966 cars. This is the kind of conspiracy that the Justice Department was alluding to in its investigation.
That was why they suggested at the grand jury in Los Angeles that it be criminal charges.
That's right. 18 months. They paraded witnesses before this grand jury, in secret, of course. And then at the end, for some mysterious reason, the antitrust chief in the Justice Department dropped the criminal case. And then a full year later, the Justice Department filed a mild civil complaint. That was in January of this year. And of course, in September of this year, they decided to settle it by virtue of a consent decree. What is a consent decree? It in effect says, okay, auto industry, in return for giving up our power to prosecute you for the past, you agree to go and sin no more.
They reached a consent decree in which the companies agreed that they wouldn't do it anymore if the government would agree that all the testimony, a good many volumes taken in the grand jury disclosing what the conspiracy was, wouldn't be made public. Well, that's a marvelous deal for them. You violate the laws until you get caught, and when you get caught, you promise you won't do it again if the government will promise that we don't disclose how bad we've been. If I don't know anybody else who can get by with that, I think the public ought to know what was the conspiracy. What were the agreements? We have all kinds of antitrust suits in this country, but nobody wishes to take on the biggest corporation in the world, I think, is the practical political fact, and that's been true, whether it's a Republican administration or a Democratic administration. When you get an industry so concentrated, so huge, employs so many people, considered to be such an important industry, all of its powers of propaganda, all of its impact in the economy, and the development of an attitude by the public that this great industry in the free enterprise system can do no wrong, that's real political power.
As far as pollution is concerned, this is where the most outrageous prevarication occurs by auto industry executives. They say that the pollution problem has virtually been solved. The point is that they put these controls on these cars, and then after a few thousand miles, the performance degrades very rapidly until at the 11,000 mile level. On the average, they don't even meet federal standards, which are very weak to begin with.
Automobiles showered about 10 million tons of air pollution over Canada last year, our share of the 100 million tons on this continent. Canadian cars got the same pollution controls as U.S. cars in almost precise lockstep with the American schedule. There probably was no conspiracy here in the legal sense, since our law can't operate in situations where branch plants simply follow U.S. Home Office directives. So much for the image of good corporate citizens described by Robert Winters before he left the federal cabinet to become a vice president of Ford. The question is whether government or laws can protect consumers from the possible misuse of the enormous power in the hands of huge corporations.
I think it is fundamentally correct that the auto industry sets its own pace on everything. They pollute the air, which belongs to us, not to them. They leave us millions of old auto bodies across the countryside, no concern, no social interest in seeing that this problem is avoided. They spend vast amounts of money making ridiculous changes in the design of an automobile that doesn't improve its safety, doesn't improve its economy, doesn't improve its comfort, in order to change the style, to tell the public that you need this brand new style.
There's a total anarchy operating here, and if there has to be a cry of law and order in this country, I would apply it to corporate crime far above any other form of crime in the United States, because in terms of lives lost and health impaired and property taken or defrauded, corporate crime is the leading and the most significant course of crime in this nation.
One company, General Motors, has more revenue every year than any national government in the world, excepting the U.S. and the USSR. That's more than every level of government in Canada combined. It's probably a whole lot easier to fight City Hall.
More later on your car and your cost of living, and we'll be inviting Consumer Affairs Minister Ron Bassford to help you explore what kind of controls and interests your government has in an industry several times larger than itself.
I'm Stephen Dewar. Last week, U.S. Senator Gaylord Nelson and consumer advocate Ralph Nader gave us their view of North America's auto industry.
The sophistication of modern industry is such that they can rob people in the hundreds of millions of dollars in such subtle ways that the consumer just is not aware and has very few remedies even if he is aware. The automobile basically is a late 19th century invention. And let's face it hasn't changed that much since the early 20th century. The basic configuration of an automobile, from its power plant to its mode of operation, hasn't changed that much. It has become more reliable over time, to be sure, just as in the same period of time we've gone from the gas-like period of history to the atomic and space age. But in terms of real innovation, for product quality, for product economy of operation, for safety, for no pollution, it is a generation behind time due to a deliberate repression of innovation by the auto industries.
I think it is fundamentally correct that the auto industry sets its own pace on everything. They pollute the air, which belongs to us, not to them. They leave us millions of old auto bodies across the countryside, no concern, no social interest in seeing that this problem is avoided. They spend vast amounts of money making ridiculous changes in the design of an automobile that doesn't improve its safety, doesn't improve its economy, doesn't improve its comfort, in order to change the style, to tell the public that you need this brand new style.
They don't like the auto industry's record on prices, service, parts, safety, or even pollution. Following our invitation of last week, Canada's Consumer and Corporate Affairs Minister, Ron Bassford, joined me in our Ottawa studios to give us his views. You've been studying car prices, as we put in the item. Have you reached any conclusions yet?
No, we are, as was shown last week, assessing it as a government, what we should do, both in the limited area of car prices, and of course we're concerned about the whole inflationary situation.
Now,
I am not at this point. I have a good many ideas what I would like to do, but I at this point am not in a position to, tonight, Sunday night, make an announcement on what we're doing with car prices.
okay, but could you tell us what area you're studying? Is it Canada-U.S. prices alone, or what?
Oh, well, the relationship between them, the relationship between this year's and last year's prices, and the whole price trend. which is complicated, I must admit, and think I should say, by the existence of the automobile agreement, which brings in all sorts of other factors, and which is an agreement which has been of great benefit to Canada. My own view is I don't think that the agreement, it's increased production in Canada, increased employment, helped our balance of payments situation. My own personal view is I don't think, I think the agreement should pay more attention to the price mechanism. And I think it's absolutely essential, my own view, that faster than has been happening, the differential between U.S. and Canadian prices disappear.
Now, one of the areas we talked about is the whole business of pricing last week, and the assertion that's been around from Senate committees for at least a decade that General Motors simply prices to get the profit return it wants, and the other people follow suit because they're so much smaller they can't deal with General Motors.
I think that's the evidence of General Motors itself.
They've stated that.
And so I think we must accept that. It's their evidence. And I think this is true, and this is our problem with an industry that is dominated by one or two or three very large firms where there is very great difficulty of entry, of new firms developing. It's not like a dry cleaning business where anyone else can start another dry cleaning business. Fantastic problems of regulating that industry and judging its efficiency and judging its performance and judging whether it is serving itself or serving the community in which it operates. And my own view is we just don't have enough information, and I'm not talking just about General Motors, although you were, but I mean the same is true of DuPont or General Foods or all of the big corporations. We don't have enough information. I think that not only the government and us in the Combines branch needs more information, but the whole public needs more information so that they can make judgments. And therefore, I introduced last session amendments to the Companies Act, which are really quite pioneering amendments to force greater corporate disclosure. And they improve the kind of disclosure a public company must make. They force the large private, or will, when it's passed, force their large private companies to disclose as a public company. And an innovation, and this is why I described it as pioneering, that we were trying to get away with these consolidated balance sheets and profit and loss statements, which don't show anything. And if companies were operating distinct and different classes of businesses, they would have to report those as such.
You're going to get
and their performance. Now, this was introduced last session by me. It will be reintroduced. There's going to be, let's not kid ourselves, I understand anyway, some enormous opposition to this. And this is why this sort of discussion is good. I need some support on this type of legislation.
That's what this whole series about automobile prices is about.
We've agreed that in this sector, where there is such tremendous market power, that there's real evidence that competitive forces don't work. There's great rivalry as to models, but there's no price competition.
So why not do a general research inquiry right now?
Well, because at the moment, the resources which I say are limited, and I wish I had more, I think that they are better put into writing the kind of law and working on this revision and getting a law which will deal with the whole thing rather than just having another inquiry.
But at the same time, they're raising prices.
This is a priority that I must make as to how best to use what resources I've got. And I think that it's most important that we have as quickly as we can a new antitrust piece of legislation in this country. And I don't want to be misunderstood. I have a pretty dedicated and able staff in the Combines branch, but they don't have all the resources I think that they should have, and they don't have the law to work with that I think that they should have.
Canadian law is notoriously weak.
Yeah, well, the merger and monopoly sections, which are there, have, in my view, pretty well been denatured by the interpretation that our courts have put on them.
Could General Motors be put together today? Could the 200 corporations that went to, or whatever number, that went to put that huge conglomerate we call General Motors together, that has 50% of the automobile market, could something that large be put together today?
Economically or legally?
Legally.
I would doubt it, because, well, I would. I said I talked about the the way our merger and monopoly law had, I think, been denatured by the courts. But it's still there, and there is some, we still watch mergers and monopolies very carefully. And I think that we could use that law if we saw that developing, at least to delay it until we had some better laws.
But if that was the case, then what you're saying essentially is the law would hold that a company the size of General Motors, with its power over its market, in terms of the goods it has to buy and what it sells and everything else down the line, would be outside the public interest and would be declared illegal. But there it is, day in, day out, affecting our economy and the way we live, and with a concentration of power. Can you deal with it? Just Canada alone. Can Canada deal with General Motors?
Well, this really, no, I don't think it can. And I think this is an area where Canada should be pushing, and I think is pushing, that there is at the moment really no international concern about the large multinational corporations. We have some arrangements with the United States and with OECD as to reporting, but one of my officials is chairman of an OECD committee where he is pushing for some type of international exchange of information to start with, and then hopefully some sort of international control.
Now, the auto industry has been raising prices since the fall of '64, very markedly, for the first 2 years of that time. According to the United Auto Workers statistics, and they should know about per unit labor costs, it's been per unit labor costs were going down. Now, didn't they get right in at the start of the current inflationary spiral and perhaps contribute a great deal to it?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm not going to argue statistics. Both the companies and I think the unions have their own axe to grind, and usually I find people can produce statistics to show anything. But I'm not going to say who's causing inflation. What we are saying as a government right now is that people should stop increasing their prices, and that there have been price increases that are unacceptable. The Economic Council said that profit levels over the last year have risen at too high a rate, and that there have been unacceptably high wage increases.
Every year since '65, the prices have gone up. They're going up this year, and we've actually got a contraction in the economy, the last quarter. We've got the worst of both worlds, inflation and recession, and yet prices still go up. What about wage control? Price controls in some areas?
I'm not aware that we have a recession.
We just went down 0.9% in the gross national product.
Well, rather than have price controls at the moment, what the government is it's following the traditional methods of fiscal and monetary or tightening credit controls. And we have established the Prices and Incomes Commission, which is trying to negotiate an arrangement short of price controls, without all the bureaucratic difficulty that price control has, but would have the same effect. They are working on this. I think it was, it's an experimental approach, one worth trying. We've got four very able people working. No, we don't know whether it will work. I certainly hope it will. If it doesn't, I'm very clear in my mind, and I think the Prime Minister has said this, that if this approach doesn't work, and the other things we're doing about inflation are not working enough, we are going to have to look at other things.
We invited the big three auto manufacturers to join Mr. Basford in that videotaped conversation. Chrysler President Ron Todgham couldn't make it. The public relations chief of Ford told W5 this wasn't the medium for such a discussion. And at GM, replies from the president down revealed that, in their words, we couldn't find anyone who was interested in doing it. Mr. Basford said he expects a fight in getting tougher combines laws. You can bet there'll be lots of interest in them, not all of it in so public a forum as a TV studio. Our Consumer Affairs Minister also said he needs a lot of support in any effort to learn the facts about auto pricing practices or to curb irresponsible profit margins. We couldn't get the car makers on the record for you, but you can get your views on record by writing to Mr. Basford or to your MP.